I want to bring on my guest, though. We're joined with the man himself, a good friend, Garland Nixon. Garland Nixon is a political analyst. He runs his show, Garland Nixon. He is on all times, so definitely check him out. In fact, he's going to have a hell of a show today that is going to go for several hours. How you doing, my man? You doing okay?
I'm doing wonderful.
I saw this clip. I saw it this morning, and I thought Garland is the perfect person to talk to about this. Christoper Steele has come out of the woodwork. I don't know if you've seen this. He's been doing interviews, and he goes on Piers and gets his knuckles wrapped by Scott. What is the guy's name? Scott Horton. Listen to what is said here. It is amazing to me that after everything that's taken place on the issue of Russiagate, it is known that Steele lied, that he got it wrong, that he was using all of this information and data that was completely dodgy and stovepiped into the FBI, CIA, all these intelligence services where they actually went after Donald Trump in a way that I have never seen before. Effectively, Russiagate. I guess McCarthy will probably be the closest thing to it. And almost took down a president because of it. Because their motto was, well, Trump got in because of the Russians. And if we find anything, we will take him out in a soft coup. Scott gets the ability to confront Christoper Steele. And this is what it said. I want to get your take on what Scott is saying here. Just amazing to me that Christoper Steele came back out the woodwork after all of this.
And this liar framed him essentially for treason. And by the way, his primary sources were a Russian named Danchenko, who had been under investigation for being a Russian spy in the past. And the only reason they had dropped is because they mistakenly thought he left the country. And then his partner, an American named Dolan, who actually was a registered agent of Russia. And they were the two primary sources who made up all those lies that you and I just recited, Piers.
By the way, just to interrupt real quick, Christoper Steele shaking his head. Everything Scott just said that was true. Everything he said was true. In fact, Danchenko was being prosecuted by the U.S. government over a lot of this stuff.
Well,
so the notion of him shaking his head,
well, there was maybe a little bit reason for him to shake his head. Let me tell you why. Because in what Scott Horton said, I would dispute it a little bit. Because the guy, Igor Danchenko, you're calling him a Russian. They're implying that he was working for Russia, right? He was working for the Brookings Institute,
right?
And he was working with specifically for Fiona Hill. So he was very specifically at the time a Democratic Party operative. So what they're trying to do is pretend, this is the pretense there, that is false. The pretense is, well, Steele should never have trusted him because he was working for the Russians. So he was feeding them Russian misinformation. Right. So that then says that the origin of all the lies in the Steele dossier came from Russia. While Russia did it, you were using a Russian spy. That's a lie. He wasn't working for the Russians. He was working for the Democrats. He was working for the Brookings Institute. He was working for Fiona Hill. All of the lies came directly from the Democratic Party. So even Scott Horton, for whatever reason, has it completely wrong. No, it didn't come from the Russian. No, it wasn't a Russian spy. He was a Democratic Party spy on the payroll of Fiona Hill and Brookings Institute. So even Scott Horton, his words help the anti-Russian people because they can then say, well, you know, poor old Christoper Steele, he was misled by the Russians. No, he was not misled by a Russian spy.
Christoper Steele was trying to get opposition research. That's what he wanted. So why would the Russians feed him information that the Russians were trying to overthrow the U.S. election? I agree with you. It makes no sense.
But the guy that he got it from was on the payroll of the Brookings Institute. And Scott Horton says, well, he was being investigated as a Russian spy. No, he was not. He was working for the Brookings Institute for Fiona Hill. He was working, who might I add, eventually testified in an impeachment case against Donald Trump. She was working. She testified in an impeachment case against Donald Trump. The person he was working for eventually worked on the plan to impeach Donald Trump. He was at the beginning of the plan to impeach Donald Trump, and his direct supervisor was at the far end of the plan to impeach Donald Trump. So Scott Horton gets it wrong. I would argue with Scott Horton. I love you, Scott Horton. You do a lot of good work, but you are actually helping the anti-Russia people by implying that Christoper Steele was somehow misled by the Russians. And Christoper Steele knew at the time who he was getting it from, and he hid it. Anyway, go ahead.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that explanation. You're absolutely right. Everything you just said is right. I guess I was pointing out that Horton is right to go after Steele.
Yeah.
That what Steele put out was nonsense. That Steele put out a bunch of opposition research in the service of a political party. I mean, the entire document was to get opposition research on Donald Trump. Opposition research is not meant to be
well, you
honest.
know what? I wouldn't even give it the credit of being opposition research, right? Opposition research implies that they looked into something and they found some dodgy stuff and twisted it. Right. No, they made it up from whole cloth. There was no research. They're just like, let me see. Donald Trump is Russian spy, maybe? Okay, sounds good. Write that down. That's not research. They made it up out of absolute lies. So it wasn't opposite research. In fact, it wasn't opposition research. It was the opposition making up lies to take out Donald Trump. So it wasn't even research. That would be given at the bit. If at least if they went online or look. Might I add, the other guy that they got, I think his name was Dolan, Christopher Dolan or something.
Yeah.
He was in Virginia. He had been the head of the Hillary Clinton campaign in Virginia when she was running for president.
Well, I mean, Clinton was the one that got this information. I think he came out of McCain or something like that. But I guess my point is, this was rumors and just nonsense that they came up with, that they ran with, and criminalized the rumors and nonsense using Steele, who is sitting here shaking his head. It's like, this is outrageous. Like the fact that Steele is showing his face after the Steele doc, it's just mind-blowing. That's a little bit more. And thank you for that. You nailed it masterfully.
That made it into Steele's dossier that they use. And none of it was true. Not the hacking of the DNC, not the Alpha Bank, not any of the Steele dossier. I'm amazed that this guy is willing to show his face in public right now when he's nothing but a washed up spy who hadn't had contacts in Russia for years by the time that he published that pile of lies.
And you know what?
I love that. That washed up spy has, I can't believe he has the temerity to show his face after pushing that document. Russiagate was not a minor entity. And I would go so far as to say part of this inability to make peace now is directly related to Russiagate. Even the degree to which Joe Biden was willing to pursue that war, I would wager to you, was party to the Russiagate stuff and the bad blood that was injected into the American political system by Hillary Clinton, using this as a way of attacking Donald Trump. And that attack has lasted for years. And it has seeded the American public with a certain point of view, especially Democrats, that Trump didn't get elected on his own steam, that Vladimir Putin overthrew our elections in a coup and installed Donald Trump as his principal actor in the United States. Okay, this is nonsense, but this is what they ran with. This is what the Democrats, even today, if you get a random Democrat and you guys get in the conversation, it will come up. It will come up. Give me your take.
A couple of things. Number one, the fact that it came from Steele makes one thing obvious, and that is that MI6 led the charge to take out Trump. The MI6 was they were the leading edge of the attack to take out Trump. They were like, let me at him. All right. That's number one. If I were to interview Christoper Steele, I'd ask him something differently. I'd ask him as a professional. You know, I was in law enforcement and all that kind of stuff. And I worked with various three-letter agencies for the state of Maryland, supposedly on terrorism at the time. Looking back, I think there might have been, so they may have been up to much more. But at any rate, what I would say to them is I would talk to him about the level of incompetence. I'd say, look, you know, I know, we all know it was a bullcrap report and that you were just out to get Trump. It was your job. You were getting paid. I don't agree with it, but we all know what you did. Let's not pretend here. I would say, however, the level of incompetence that report shows is stunning. I'd say I can do a better report than that, Christoper Steele. I'd say, let's start here. You wrote in that report that Russia was coordinating their finances to help Trump out of the Miami consulate. Mm-hmm. But there is no Russian consulate in Miami. Don't you think perhaps you should have done a little bit of research? You wrote that report. Don't you think that you should have at least researched, hey, it's the Miami consulate. Let me look up the Miami consulate. Maybe I'll put in the address. Holy crap, there is no consulate in Miami. Maybe I shouldn't put this in. We all know it was a pile of crap, me and you both. But couldn't you have been competent enough to put a decent lie in there? Why would you write that they were coordinated out of the Miami consulate and never even research to find out if one existed? That's what I would say to him. Hey, I know what you're doing. Let's not pretend. You can stand there and do this, or you can wiggle your head in all these different directions. I think we all know what's going on here. But couldn't you at least make a decent lie?
Mm-hmm.
If I was to write, yes, Jamal Thomas robbed the bank on Tuesday, don't you think I should check and say, wait a minute, he was on vacation in Puerto Rico on Tuesday. Perhaps I better choose another day. No, I just write that. Yeah, there was he robbed the bank, but there was no bank, and he was in Puerto Rico. On First, the bank on First and Elm, the First National Bank on First and Elm. Don't you think I should look and see? Well, there is no First National Bank in that entire town. They closed their last one a year ago. And by the way, First National Bank sold out the M&T, so they don't even exist anymore. Shouldn't I research that before I hand in a report? You handed in a report with information that was beyond erroneous. You discredited the entire document and yourself by putting something in there. So I wouldn't have you write a book report for my 6-year-old daughter. If I had a 6-year-old daughter, I wouldn't let you write a book report for her in 4th grade, looking at that piece of trash that they paid you for. You should be embarrassed and humiliated that you handed in something of that level of absurdity. That's what I would say to him.
And like you pointed out, he got paid for that. He got paid for that. You're absolutely right. They didn't check. They didn't care. They just put something out and they ran with it. Like, that's the mind-blowing part of all of this. And now Christoper Steele feels the need to show his face again in order to come back. I guess what? To bolster the document that was shown to be fraudulent and false. I mean, just outrageous. I'm glad Piers Morgan had him on. I'm glad Horton, even as imprecise as Horton is, went after him for putting out a fake document. It wasn't just Horton. The other woman also got involved, effectively going after Christoper Steele, saying you tried to overthrow the government of the U.S. With this dodgy document that was brought into the CIA and the FBI. It's amazing. It's just
you know what I keep saying. If I was Trump, look, MI6 is trying to take Trump out. That's obvious. They have been from the very beginning. If I was Trump, there's an easy way to go after him. I would put their butts on the skittle. You know what I would say? I'm sending Tulsi Gabbard over on Friday, and I'd say it on Thursday. She'll be on a plane tonight. She needs to talk to the Scripples. I'm sending her over to talk to the Scripples. Yeah, it's critical. You know, we're really concerned. Before I sign anything or really go any further with the Russians, I want to make sure that I get all the information. So because that's something they may bring up, and they may say they want to talk to the Scripples. So I need to talk to the Scripples first. I'm going to send Tulsi. In fact, she's on a plane. She'll be landing in 2 hours. She needs to meet with you and talk to the Scripples. I then call the Germans and say, oh, by the way, I got RFK Jr., whoever, my CDC people, they'll be landing. All of the Novichok stuff on what's the guy's name? Alex, the guy that died in prison. What's his name?
I know you
I remember that there was a Novichok attack on him. I got my forensic scientists landing. They're going to need to be looking at all of the information on Novichok, on the Novichok attack on him. We got to have that information. It's critical because I brought it up. You know, I intend to bring it up with President Putin, and I intend to say to him, we'll have no more Novichok attacks. And when I do that, I got to have everything I need to prove to him, look, dude, I got the evidence. Even if I don't give it to him, I want my people to have the evidence so we can work on it. Tulsi needs to talk to the Scripples, and Ratliff's on the plane with her. They need to talk to the Scripples, and George, because there is none. There is no evidence, and there ain't no Scripples. They have left this mortal plane at the hands of MI6. And how are they going to? So if MI6 is coming after me, I put their butts on the skid immediately and say, oh, yeah, we need to talk to the Scripples. What do you think the hell do you think they would do?
Oh, I have no idea. There will be a collective, SFIT.
That's what I do.
Yeah,
You got
yeah.
to, you know what I mean? The best defense is a good offense. If they're coming after me, fine. Come after me. I'm gonna make your life friggin' miserable. They better be glad I'm not president, buddy. They better be glad I'm not president.
Listen, you had to put this screw some. I want